Greedy little Steve. Once upon a time, there was a little boy named Steve who lived with his parents in a faraway village surrounded by forests. Steve was an only child and his parents doted on him, giving him every toy and treat he asked for. Steve loved getting new toys, but instead of being satisfied, he would quickly get bored and demand the next fun thing. His room overflowed with ignored toys while Steve constantly pestered his parents to buy him more. One day, Steve was wandering through the trees near his home when he stumbled upon a tiny fox cub. The helpless little red cub was whimpering, alone and afraid. Steve looked around but didn't see any other foxes nearby. It seemed this cub had been separated from its family. Steve felt sad for the poor fox. He carefully picked up the cub and carried it home. That night, the fox slept curled up on an old blanket in Steve's room. In the morning, Steve begged his parents to let him keep the fox as a pet. His parents didn't want a wild fox running around the house, but they saw how much Steve already cared for the cub, and considering there were no animal shelters nearby, they agreed to let Steve keep the little fox temporarily. They hoped that he would take good care of the fox cub. Finally, they agreed he could keep it until it was old enough to return to the forest. Steve named the fox cub Russet. He fed it scraps from the table and played with it every day. Having a pet fox was new and exciting at first. But soon Steve grew bored of Russet. Just as he did with his other toys. The fox just wanted to cuddle and play forest adventures, which weren't fancy enough for Steve. He imagined exciting new games they could play if only he had more toys and gadgets. Steve started leaving Russet alone while he sulked around the house pestering his mom for a new electric racetrack. His dad dragged home a giant train set to cheer Steve up, but he just complained it wasn't as cool as what other kids had. Meanwhile, Russet waited patiently for Steve's attention. The fox cub didn't care about fancy toys. All Russet needed to be happy was Steve's friendship. But Steve huffed and ignored the doting fox, more focused on getting the next new thing. Then one sunny morning, Steve woke up to find Russet's blanket empty. The fox was nowhere to be found. Steve searched everywhere around the house and yard, panic rising in his chest. Finally he ran outside and into the surrounding forest, yelling Russet's name. Steve wandered the woods for hours, fearing the worst. As the sun started to set, he came to a clearing. There was a narrow cave opening at the base of a rock ledge. Steve crawled inside the small cave, still calling desperately for his missing pet. To his surprise, he suddenly found himself in a larger cavern inside the rocks. It was filled with thick ferns and moss. The faint light from the opening illuminated a mound of leaves in the corner. And curled up asleep on the leaves was Russet. The little fox awoke with a start when Steve cried its name joyfully. Russet jumped up and showered a relieved Steve with happy fox kisses. Steve hugged the fox tight, promising he'd never neglect it again. Looking around the cave, Steve realized this must be Russet's home and family. He saw bones and feathers scattered around indicating other foxes lived here too. Steve smiled, knowing Russet had only wandered away to come back home, not because it wanted to run away forever. From then on, Steve made sure to show Russet how much he appreciated their friendship. He didn't need new gadgets to have fun. Exploring the forest with Russet was adventure enough. When Steve's parents saw the change in him, they realized maybe they had been overdoing it with the presents. What mattered wasn't material stuff, but rather love and friendship. So while Steve still enjoyed an occasional new toy now and then, he had learned to be satisfied with what he had. He was grateful for his wonderful family, his cozy home, and, most importantly, the companionship of his dear friend Russet the fox. The fox had taught him to appreciate the simple joys in life. And Steve realized true happiness doesn't come wrapped in a box with a bow on top. It comes from a content heart.